started, everyone. It's 5:31, and we do want to be done by 7 o'clock so everybody can get to dinner or more important things. So if I had a gavel, I would gavel us to order, but all I've got is a pen and a glass top, so I'll do my best there. Thanks, everyone, for participating. There's a participant list down there. You can kind of hit that, and you'll see who else is there, or go on your screen to look for a new screen. There's about 25 people on board tonight. First, in addition to those thank yous, congratulations to all of the legislators. This is our second meeting. If we didn't get a chance to say congratulations to you on your election before, if you weren't at our first meeting on November 10th, congratulations now. We know what a pain, how difficult the election process can be, but also congratulations on leadership positions. A lot of those have been assigned, and congratulations on selections to leaders in the legislature. Quickly, the city's purpose in calling these meetings is probably threefold. First, to build lines of communication. We're confident that we can get more done for our community working together and just building those lines of communication so people kind of know who's who. And also, it's just more fun. And life is a little bit more pleasant and less difficult when we actually know who's who. Second, the city doesn't want to communicate issues that it thinks are important going into the legislature. And third, we want to listen to our legislators, hear what you think is important, what you want to tell us. A few quick reminders for our get together this evening. First, this is a public meeting, and so it's being recorded, and the meeting was noticed. The public is invited to participate here as part of this Zoom. There's not a call in, so you may see some names or faces you don't recognize that are just members of the public. If you are not a legislator, a city council person, or city staff, or an invited guest, and you are a member of the public, you'll have an opportunity to comment at the end of the meeting, item number 8. We just ask that you hold your comments until that time. We do have to move quickly, so we won't have a lot of time, but there will be an opportunity for public comment. Our agenda is available on the city website under the Magic City Spotlight part of the city website. If you don't have a copy, we'll try to keep you posted kind of where we're at on the agenda. We've got 8 or 9 items on the agenda. And again, public comment is item number 8 at the end. Everyone, if you would mute your screen when you're not speaking, it'll just improve quality and maybe not embarrass you when you say something that you regret later. And then lastly, because we do want to finish by 7 o'clock, we'll have to move quickly and try to be as concise as possible, especially with the substantive 4 items in the middle of our agenda, items 3 through 6, each of which we could spend hours on, but tonight we'll only have about 15 minutes for each item. So we may not solve all of the world's problems, just most of them tonight. Before we get into the more substantive part of the meeting, why don't we just do a quick around the clock or around the world. Your screen may not look like mine. And so what we did last time, and I think we're pretty well, just to make sure everybody had an opportunity, was we went by a month of your birthday. So why don't we do that again? And if you are born in January, just speak up and tell us who you are, and anything else except just make it real quick. So let's start with January. Who are our January birthdays?
Good evening, Mayor. Bill Mercer, House District 46.
I can't necessarily see everybody, so you'll have to just speak up if, don't wait for me to call on you. Anybody else in January? Guess not. February.
I'm a February, Dave Armstrong with Alternatives Incorporated, the Pastis Pre-Release Center in the Alpha House and Beta Alternatives.
Who else in February?
Hello, Mr. Mayor. This is Captain Harper with the Billings Police Department.
Great. Anybody else? March.
Mr. Mayor, it's Senator Mary McNally and representing Senate District 24, which is downtown.
Mr. Mayor, it's Representative Emma Kerr-Carpenter. I represent House District 49.
Any other March babies? April.
Brad Molnar, Senate District 28, which is Laurel and Lockwood.
Kendra Shaw, City Council, Ward 1, which is downtown, south side, north side, hospital corridor, little piece of the Heights.
Larry Brewster. Oh, Larry Brewster, House District 44 in the Heights.
Roy Neese, Ward 2 in the Heights, everything north of Hilltop.
Wow, lots of Aprils. What was going on?
I'm Mr. Mayor, Carrie Seekins Crow, representing House District 43 in the Heights.
Okay. Anybody else in April?
Mr. Mayor, Representative Barry Usher, House District 40, Shepherd, Broadview, Roundup.
Yeah. I guess 9 months before was September. Is that all of our April? Okay, May.
Kathy Kelker, House District 47, North Park, and part of the hospital corridor.
No more Mays?
Mr. Mayor, this is Greg Dorrington. Hi, everyone. Lawyer lobbyist for the city of Billings. It's great to see everyone's smiling faces again. Thanks for making time.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Tom McGildray, House District or Senate District 23, Billings West End and the west side of the Heights.
Mr. Mayor, Terry Moore and House District 54, West End Billings.
June.
Scott Twido, Yellowstone County Attorney.
More in June? July. Bill Cole, Mayor in Billings. Nobody else in July? August.
Mike Linder, Yellowstone County Sheriff.
September.
Good evening, Amy Grimales, lawyer at Crowley Fleck and lobbyist for City of Billings. And I just had 2 hours of Zoom training on how to testify. And it said you should act a little bit more like a news anchor. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Bill. I guess you've never had so many amazing Mr. Mayors. So Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Not used to that.
Exactly. Penny running City Council Ward 4, which is MSUB all the way to Phipps Park, Reberg Ranch, and out in the west drops all the way down to Broadwater.
And that was August, right? So was that September or August?
That was September.
September, okay. October.
So, Honorable Mayor, I'm Kevin Iflin. I'm the Assistant City Administrator for the City of Billings.
You can tell he's an employee. Any other Octobers? November.
Yeah, hi. Danny Tariki, Ward 3, City Council, and Chicken Chef at the moment.
Mr. Mayor and colleagues, Senator Jen Gross, District 25 in Billings. It's South Central Billings. And a number of institutions on our agenda tonight are in my district. The Women's Prison Passages Pre-Release, the Ted Lechner Center, many halfway houses. So looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Great. Any other November birthdays? We'll come back at the end for anybody we missed too, but December.
That'd probably be me.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Senator Friedel.
How you doing?
Good. Welcome to the
So,
party.
Sorry I
Kevin
was
set-
late.
I was to say, Kevin set us up. Honorable Mayor, Chris Kukulski, City Administrator.
Mike Boyette, Ward 5, the rest of the west end of Billings.
Doug Carey, Senate District 44, Billings Heights.
Great. Anybody else in December or that joined or we missed? Sounds like that's everybody. Don't expect birthday cards after all that, but thank you for letting us know who's here. Look, just a quick background, then I'm going to turn it over to Chris Kukulski to move us into item number 3, jail issues. Just a little bit of background on our last meeting on November 10th. The legislators who were not with us will be glad to know that the city of Billings doesn't have a big detailed wish list for this session. We might later, but at this point we don't. We knew that going into COVID-19 session, everything was up in the air. The budget's up in the air. Even whether there would be a session or what that session would look like was up in the air. But we did try to establish at least 5 very basic 30,000 feet overall guiding principles that were a priority. First of all, improving public safety. We'll get into that in detail. 2, increasing private economic development, especially in our city core. 3, increasing infrastructure investment. We're very much aligned with the Infrastructure Coalition on its goals. 4, where possible, shifting tax burden and tax costs to the users of government services and away from the general taxpayer. And then last, supporting self-governance. The city is of the view that the government is usually the best that is closest to the citizen. And so that requires that we maintain our autonomy to the greatest extent that is reasonable to do so. But that's very 30,000 foot. What we did jump into in detail last meeting and wanted to continue in this meeting was the focus on public safety. The need in Billings and in Yellowstone County is really undeniable. This is just one data point, but I think you all, because you all live here, you all know the truth of the matter. And that's our homicide rate. The homicide rate in very broad numbers in the United States is around 5 people per 100,000. That's been fairly consistent. Montana has consistently been less than that, probably 3 to 3.5, some years as much as 4, but still consistently less than the national average. 10 years ago, Billings was consistently less than the Montana average. This was an unusually safe place to live, and that was only 10 years ago when it came to homicide. Unfortunately, with the introduction or expansion of meth and drug use in particular, starting about 2014, we saw those homicide numbers starting to bounce. Sometimes they'd be way down, but sometimes they were way up. In 2018, we were at over 7, which is above the national average. 2019, we were kind of at the national average. But unfortunately, this year, we've seen this very sad and probably anomalous spike of 15 homicides so far in the year, and the year's not over. So, we've got a violent crime problem. A lot of it is driven by drug addiction and meth. And it's not just violent crime, but also property crime. So we identified certain issues to talk about during this meeting with the hope that we'll develop some more factual background and possible strategies for addressing them. Even though our primary discussion tonight is on public safety, we do want to give opportunity for other discussion later, if not at this meeting, at future meetings. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Kukulski, our city administrator, to quickly tee up item number 3 and to turn it over to the sheriff. So Chris?
Thank you, Mayor, and I will be brief. Thank you, Sheriff Linder, for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, we do only have probably 15, 20 minutes at most on the topic. So I think if we find something we want to drill deeper into, we're going to need to do a follow-up with a smaller group, more intimate. But the sheriff is at the core of this, has got some information. And so, Sheriff, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask if you could hit some high points there for us. And you can see from the agenda kind of what some of the subject conversations have been so far. Oh, and you are muted. So unfortunately, we're not hearing you.
That might be better.
Here you, thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me. But yeah, I'll just make this quick and then leave a little bit of time maybe for some questions here. But just so you have a little bit of history here, our jail is designed to hold 434 people. Now, about 40 of those beds are used for quarantine and isolation in both the men's and the women's unit. So we're under 400 beds available. 286 for men, 148 for women. Right now, we're averaging close to 500 inmates per day in the jail. Some are in isolation just simply because they're brought in, and we want to quarantine them for a little bit before we put them in the general population. The COVID situation has really had an impact on how many people we can have in there and how they're spaced out. So right now, our biggest problem is the number of state inmates that we have in our jail. We have over 130 state inmates that could be transferred to their programs or to the prison. You know, for us, that puts a big bind on the room that we would have for local criminals. And I know that's frustrating for everybody. It's frustrating for my deputies. It's frustrating for the police department, and it's frustrating for the citizens and the business owners. Just simply because there are not room for the people in the jail. The problem is, though, or I guess this isn't the problem. We do have room for violent criminals. We will make room for violent criminals. So if there's somebody that absolutely has to be in jail, all they have to do is call down there, make arrangements with the shift commander that's on duty. We'll make sure that they can get in there. If it's somebody that simply has 10 or 15 non-appearance warrants and they got open containers and stuff like that, there just simply is not room for them. So we know that they're probably some of the trouble people that we have in the community, and it's tough to not be able to do anything. But if they're not really committing a crime that would be considered a threat to public safety, we're just simply having to turn them away at the door. And we know that's not what everybody wants, but until we can clear out some room in our facility, that's the position we're in.
Thank you, Sheriff. Can you talk a little bit, and I'll admit, I was speculating off of some old, I think, data. The other issue that's consistent, I think, around the state is what the state of Montana reimburses or pays for inmate stay versus what we locally, what it cost us to house them. Can you chat about that for just a couple minutes?
Yes, there was a formula that was put out by the state probably about 10 years ago. It might have even been a little bit longer than that. And it was a formula for determining just how much it costs to house an inmate in a facility. And when we do the numbers on that, even when we did it before the legislature changed the amount that they could pay, we were looking at $72.50 a day to house an inmate. That's what it cost us. That's what we were charging the state. And then when the legislature changed the amount to $69, believe it or not, that $2.50 a day with the number of inmates we were holding cost us about $125,000 a year. We were the only jail, or I was the only one that responded to the state saying that we needed to go to the next step up, which if you could show that there would not be enough beds available in your jail, they would raise that by about $2. We did put in for that. It took almost a year to get that through. And then we finally started getting that fee. And then in the last change, they took that amount away, put it right back down to the $69 and some odd cents. So we lost again. So it costs us now, using the state's formula, it costs us about $100 a day to house an inmate, which is what we charge the city. It's what we charge the surrounding counties when they bring them in. But But we have very few. Carbon County, for example, if they have somebody that needs to be put in jail, they'll bring them in for overnight, and then they'll take them out to Gallatin County, who charges less and has room. The same with Stillwater County. You know, they'll find someplace else to keep them after they've been with us for a day or two. But we have very, very few inmates from surrounding counties. Maybe I'll bet we don't have 8 or 10 in there right now, and we don't take any from say Muscle Shell County stuff. They have their own jail. So for right now, we're just again we're kind of paying the difference. The local citizens are subsidizing the state to house their inmates in our jail. And we've been trying to get that changed, and it's been going on for a long time. We've been trying to get them to limit the number of inmates. And this has been going on for 10 years that I've been here in this position, because I've been calling every Department of Corrections administrator since I've been in this position, telling them to get people out of my jail. And again, I understand the COVID issue, and I'm more than happy to work with them to house some, but we just can't continue at these numbers.
Comments,
Cole,
feedback, please.
Cole,
Yes.
could I ask a question?
Sure.
A quick question to the sheriff. How the number of state inmates in our jail compares with other municipalities in the state, the larger ones?
We hold more than any other jail in the state. If you're familiar with what happened up in Great Falls, they had about, I think it was under 40, but it was close to 40 inmates that they tried to get moved. They actually went so far as to sue to get them moved. The judge ruled in their favor for the state to take these inmates to the prison, and they were overruled by the Supreme Court. So that's kind of where we're sitting now, because they were told that while the state doesn't have carte blanche to just leave them in there as long as they want, and they need to do something in a timely manner, nothing has moved.
Okay, thank you.
Sheriff or Scott Twito, can you address the legal issue of what the local government's obligation is or is not to hold DOC inmates, especially ignoring COVID? I mean, that's an emergency, unusual situation, and we're all appreciative of that. But generally speaking, do we have to hold those, or can Sheriff Linder put 100 in his car and go and drop them off in Deerlawn?
I can answer that. Sheriff Linder is obligated to hold them. However, some of you legislators may know in 2017, if someone is, their disposition is a Department of Corrections sentence, the sentencing statute was amended to allow the Department of Corrections to even release folks into the community short of holding them in the detention facility. The Department of Corrections, based on my conversations with them, have been loath to do that. And I don't necessarily disagree. The folks that typically get a DOC sentence and are housed in the Yellowstone County Detention Facility need that DOC sentence. Those are typically reserved for repeat offenders or violent or sexual offenders. So unfortunately, he's obligated to hold them and he cannot drive them to the prison. We got to hold on to them. And that includes if they're DOC inmates, if they have a medical issue that can't be handled at the facility, the Department of Corrections can incur the cost. But there's another component here that's very, very tricky with regard to jail population. And that is because COVID has really slowed down the courts in terms of getting jurors, prospective jurors in to try cases. Our trials have gone down significantly because of safety concerns. That backlogs all the folks in the jail waiting their trial dates. So it's a very, very complex issue and one that is very hard to manage.
Other questions, Kathy?
Let's see, am I unmuted? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Now you're back on mute.
I want to go back to the COVID issue. I have been on the interim committee for law and justice, and we were told by the Department of Corrections that the governor had required DOC to stop movement and not move prisoners around because that might be causing more trouble with COVID, exposing more people to the virus. And is that part of what's going on in our jail, or am I talking about something that you don't know about? Or
Well, I can answer that. Yeah, that absolutely is part of it. But this was going on long before that governor mandate came out to
okay,
have corrections. So it's not anything new, but it has had an impact.
so if I could just follow up, so
Sure.
you have do you have a lot more people in this situation because of COVID, or is that a kind of a minor problem?
No, absolutely. There are a lot more people in there. Right now, I would say that if we didn't have the COVID issue and we went back to where we were at last year, we might have on a high day 60 state inmates in there. We probably got double in there as what we would normally have, and even that is probably too many. But we can deal with that.
And just another issue to remember: when COVID came out, Sheriff Linder and I and other leaders got together, and we really significantly reduced the population in the jail. We tried to let out people that we could let out under any circumstance, and we got the population under control. And Sheriff Linder, I can't remember, I think we got it into the 300s, even under where we needed it for a while, and then it just slowly crept up. You guys have seen the crime rate. One of the things that the mayor quoted is our homicide rate, which is the highest it's ever been. But we also have 16 attempted deliberate homicides active right now this year. So, I mean, you're talking about very significant acts of violence, a lot of which those folks are housed in the detention facility.
That's correct. And we did get the numbers down into the 300s, probably the first time in 10 years that we've been down that far. And the courts worked very well with us. Scott's office worked very well with us, and we were able to get a lot of people out. Many of those are people that are right back in there. It lasted for a while, but then after they came back and the numbers kept increasing, a lot of them are new, but so many of them are pre-trial, waiting their turn to go to court and stuff. And in the meantime, we're just pretty much stuck with them. But probably one of our biggest issues that we're dealing with down there is the lack of mental health services that we have in our community for those that are in the facility. So many of them are there because of co-occurring, whether it be mental health and or addiction issues and stuff. And we're doing the best we can down there. We do have some counseling, and we use telepsych for our psychiatrist services and stuff. But there's just not enough service for the people we have. Many of them would be better served over at the prison where they have those services.
Sheriff, you mentioned that you are turning them away. How many a day or month are you turning away of who should have been housed?
I maybe Captain Harper could answer that better, because I think they've been keeping stats on that. I think we just finally quit keeping track of it, but it could be anything from 5 a day to 20 a day that get turned away. But I'm not talking about, the serious threats to our community. We will take those, but some of them that we would really like to see in the jail, or at least spend some time there. We just don't have the room for them. We're working with the commissioners right now. We do have a spot in there. We're working on possibly getting some CARES money, if that comes available again, or maybe even some FEMA money to see about converting one of the. It's a former indoor recreation area that we used to house a bunch of the males when they all came down with the virus. But luckily now we're pretty much COVID free. I think I'm not aware of any that are actually positive tests in the jail right now. But if we can get that other unit turned into kind of a holding cell, for lack of a better term, where we got to have put in showers and bathrooms and stuff, then we might be able to start taking some of these other people in there. But I'm afraid that if we make room, it's going to still fill up with the criminal element that really needs to be in jail.
Okay, and another question I have is, because it was mentioned how that you guys cleaned up the jail and released a lot of people, and we've seen our crime rates here in the city increase. Has there been any kind of correlation to show that release has has been tied to the increase in crime. If a lot of those people you've released, you mentioned a lot of them are back. So are those the people who committed these violent crimes that are now back in jail?
Scott might be able to answer that better because I don't really keep track of for us, they're just a face and a name. And we really don't keep track of the crime, so to speak.
So, Councilman Ward, what I can tell you is every morning, I do what's called criminal intake, where law enforcement agencies, the sheriff's office is there every day, the Billings Police Department's there every day. They bring cases over. I haven't done the counting, even though I've hired essentially a statistician to start counting this stuff because it's getting out of control. But one of the things that we do on the intake sheet is we list if they have pending cases. And what we're finding out is that's increasing, meaning we're checking that box more and more this year as this jail problem has arisen. Just yesterday, I did intake, and there were 5 people that had pending felonies that were given notices to appear or released on their own recognizance by the district court with the felony committing another felony in our community.
Any other questions for anyone now? Because we'll have to move on.
I actually have a comment. I don't know if it's a question. But
so yeah, Barry and then Senator Kerry and Kathy Kelker. We're going to be here all night, but go ahead, go quick.
Well, this is a hot topic. Some of the interim committee people know that I actually have a bill draft in already to get rid of DOC commits. Basically, that means, the courts just turn a prisoner over to DOC and they do what they want. Whereas if a judge sentences someone to Deer Lodge, then they go to Deer Lodge quicker than sitting in our jails for so long. Also, the criminal justice reinvestment, Representative Kelker and Senator Gross, we talked about this a lot on our committee. They did not, and I've actually talked to Scott Twyda too about, when we did it in our state, you're supposed to take money that you save on the back end and bring it and put it on the front end for mental health services, pre-trial and pre-arrest diversion programs, CIT programs. When we did that criminal justice reinvestment, we did not take any of the savings and put it on the front end of criminal justice. And I think we need to demand the new administration to revisit that and make sure that we get the savings that were promised and we put them into those programs on the front end, not just for Billings, but for, all across the state. That would help us from putting people that need mental health. If we have nowhere else to put them, we send them to our jail. And our jails are not mental health hospitals, and they should not be.
Thank you. Senator Kerry and Kathy Kelker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For Sheriff Linder, which county has the largest inmate holding in the state?
Yellowstone County.
Okay, and which county is the most costly in the state for housing?
Oh, that I don't know. They all vary. There are some that are much smaller than us that charge more because it's based on capacity and the number of inmates that they have. So I've never really looked at that. I think Bozeman is over $100 and Great Falls, I believe, is too. But I couldn't give you those numbers.
Okay, is there a required number of officers required per inmate? I'm trying to weed down as to why the largest jail where you can use probably the same amount of officers to control those individuals as 1/3 of the size, why those costs wouldn't be less. If you could help me understand that.
Some of the jails are designed and operated differently. We are probably one of the most cost-effective and efficient jails because we do what we call direct supervision. We have detention officers in the units with 40 or 50 inmates, and instead of having them housed in separate units where they have to have more officers to supervise them, you know, and we don't base it on the number of inmates. We base it on the units and the duties that need to be done, whether it be transport, whether it be an escort to medical, whether it be 3 people assigned to the women's unit and maybe 2 people assigned to the men's class unit. So it's based on units and not so much the number of inmates that are in there.
Okay. Is it also based on medical costs?
No, we actually contract with a medical provider. Correctional Health Partners takes care of all of our medicals. So, you know, they determine, they bid the I guess the contract to do the medical, and then they determine how many employees they need.
Okay. Just wanted to get a little bit better feel. Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Representative Kelker, you had something, and then we should probably try to move on.
Well, I just wanted to raise the question of whether the city has thought about the kind of legislation they'd like to see to help with the problem in our jail. My colleague, Representative Usher, has a bill in the hopper that is trying to be a solution. I think there will be some pushback from other communities on that bill. I don't know that for sure, but we are somewhat unique, and what we have to do is figure out how legislation would be of benefit to more than just Billings, so that it would be actually something that could happen at the state level. And we need some help with that, I think. You know, our minds are open to whatever might help. But I think from your description, and the sheriff did a great job of explaining it, we are somewhat unique, and therefore a legislation that is just for us is not going to go very far.
I'm not aware of a specific ask, unless you just want to build jails, 4 counties at state expense. We'll take it. And then the obvious one of trying to increase the reimbursement to actual cost to reduce the subsidy of state. That seems like a no-brainer.
And Mr. Mayor, I apologize. I wanted to hop in. I had my hand up and down a couple times. This is Senator Gross. I just wanted, so I've been hearing anecdotally about a lot of revocations that are happening. And so I'm curious what that impact is. And Mr. Twito, maybe you can get back to us on that if you don't have that at hand. And I was also curious if there are ongoing efforts as we're looking at the jail population to, you know, are there folks that can be released? I was really impressed initially with the effort in the county to bring the jail population down. I think it was by over 100 initially when the governor's order came out, and then it filled right back up. So is that effort ongoing? Are we constantly looking at folks to, okay, it may be safe to release them? So revocation and then ongoing efforts. Thank you.
And that's a perfect segue to our next item, which is parolees. And so why don't we ask Scott Twito to answer that question and move on to our item number 4, parolees and early release. Chris Kupolsky, is there anything you wanted to say to tee that one up?
Well, if I could, and I'm sorry, Mayor, just briefly, I would say, Representative Usher, yes, we should be working with you offline on that bill. And then I was thinking that maybe the County Attorney Twito and the sheriff, if there are any legislative pieces we think would make a difference, we can certainly work with the committee, with Kathy and Barry and a smaller group to do that, because we want to be supportive as much as we need you guys to work collectively, recognizing we really do have a different situation than the rest of Montana.
Okay, thanks. County Attorney Twito, can you move us into the next item and answer Senator Gross's question?
I'll try. If you guys really want to dig deep into revocations and revoking parole. We'll be here all night, but I'll try to give you an overview, and Senator Gross will try to answer your question. Revocations are actually down. A lot of that is a function of COVID due to, and that's what I say revocation, I'm talking about felony revocations that involve the Department of Corrections and the Probation and Parole Department. And that's just because of COVID has limited what probation and parole officers can do and what we can do in terms of the courts. As you know, in 2017, the way you could revoke someone changed significantly with justice reinvestment. There became the compliant, non-compliant violations with an effort to exhaust all means to keep the person in the community before doing a formal revocation of their sentence, which would ultimately put them in the Department of Corrections somewhere in some secure facility. So to answer your question, those are down. There are continuing efforts to keep the jail population under control under several platforms. Yellowstone County is part of the pilot pre-sentence advisory group, where we do the pre-trial diversion, or excuse me, the pre-release diversion. So we try to get people out. For example, I can't think of the last time that we set a bond on a drug offense where they're not released on their own recognizance. Occasionally, if they have a certain number of previous felony convictions, or perhaps something like a bail jumping or an escape, the court might set a bond with more significant conditions before giving release. As far as the parole goes, and just to point out something that's sort of an unintended consequence of what's happened over the last 5-6 years in the criminal justice world in Montana, and these numbers speak for themselves. And there are some explanations for this. I'm sure some of them will pop into your mind when I say this, but we look at recidivism rates all the time. And I know Dave Armstrong can talk to you about recidivism, and there's been success, but generally speaking, the recidivism rate, and this is from the Department of Corrections' own numbers, is right around 70%. And by recidivism, that person is going to commit a new crime when paroled into a community, approximately 70% of the time. So give or take. And we took a snapshot of a period of a year, and some of you may have even seen these figures. I think I shared them with Representative Usher and Representative Kelker at some point. But Yellowstone County got 181 violent or sex offenders paroled from the prison into their community, and in the same time frame, Gallatin County got 1. Missoula got 30. That tells me that our local criminal justice system, our parole department, our state parole workers here, because those numbers didn't change, they are getting overburdened. And I'm sure there's a lot of explanations, but that is an unintended consequence. And we've seen that. I can tell you one of the most brutal homicides that we had this year was someone that was just released into our community and killed an individual in our community. And that, I mean, they hadn't been out 3 weeks before doing that. So they do have impact. There's an anecdotal story right there. So that's something to be aware of when you're up at the legislature in terms of moving people into the community and moving resources into communities. We are different. We have, between our jail population and our people on felony paper, felony probation or parole, you're looking at 2,500 folks. That's huge. Nobody comes close.
So part of why I would wrap in that, and I could try to keep it real high level. If you recall last session, there was a run at pushing roughly $1 million of public defender cost onto the city of Billings and Yellowstone County because the state was tired of dealing with this. Well, I'm going to be pushing my local elected officials that our economy and our community is going to be decimated if we don't get a handle on crime. And it's going to cost us a lot of money to deal with the full system. So we really need your help here. And it's super complex. And we know we can't arrest our way out of it, but we can't be the problem that everybody sends their folks to and not be surprised that we're having to deal with so much on the criminal justice system side.
Hey, Scott, I'd have a question for you. So what's the legislation that's needed to spread those out? So Gallatin County, maybe it's a pro rata to population centers. Is it our services here that bring them, or is there something else that we need to do to spread that?
I mean, let's be honest. That is some of the services that Billings has in place and provides. That's where people gravitate. I mean, there are a lot of issues as to why they're put in Billings. It's not. I'm not going to blame like the state agencies that they're dumping their problems on Billings. It's very complex. The answer as far as legislation is very complex. I mean, I've looked. I was on meetings today with county attorneys from across the state trying to figure this out on a statewide level, and certainly advocating for my community in terms of the exploding crime rate here. I think some of the solutions, like with Representative Usher and the Oversight Committee, in terms of their the use of that DOC sentence, where it's like administratively, the folks are just released by someone making a decision rather than the judge who made the decision in that community what to do with that individual, how to tailor that sentence. We've just become reliant on those DOC sentences, and maybe there's something to be explored there. But again, that's been such a part of our criminal justice system for 25 years, as long as I've been a prosecutor. So to eliminate that, I can't tell you exactly what impact that's going to have. But that maybe there's something like that. But I guess I just implore you, I don't have any easy answers, Senator-elect McGilvray. I can just tell you that please just be aware when that DOC person is testifying in front of you of the unique challenges of what's happening to even our big cities. I mean, I can tell you the hammer's fallen hard in Billings, but it's bad in Great Falls. It's bad in Missoula. If you look at the FBI numbers, the violent crime rate is up like 65% in Missoula this year. So it's bad in our big cities. So I would just be cautious, and I would ask for something too. One of the things that I discovered sort of in the interim that was, and I shared this, I know, with Representative Kelker and Representative Usher, and I believe Representative Mercer, is that the DOC really wasn't tracking numbers of where people were really going. They weren't sharing those numbers. The other thing that was interesting is Sheriff Linder and I, and this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we met with representatives of the Department of Corrections, and they didn't even know who was in our jail. They didn't even know they had their own people that were committed to their department in the jail. So there needs to be, and I know they've worked on this, and I know Representative Usher's worked on this. We got to keep track of what they're doing, because I think sometimes that gets lost, that they don't even know what's happening.
Scott, how many of those 181 had links to Yellowstone County or Eastern Montana, where we're the largest community and the only place to find a job? There's not a lot of violent trust fund babies in Bozeman. Maybe those are legitimate numbers. Do we know? Oh, Scott, you're muted.
Sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I can only say, like, with regard to like the sex offenders, we're one of only a few communities that will take sex offenders for treatment in a community. And so we would get sex offenders that necessarily wouldn't have a tie to our community other than the fact that we have community treatment.
Seems like we need to get that data. Other questions for Scott on this issue, or comments on this issue of parolees and early release impacts in Billings? Go ahead and just, Councilmember Ronning, and feel free to just shout out too.
Thank you. Scott, I just wanted to comment on something you said, and I'm not really sure who it was that asked you the question, but I think it's important and this kind of goes back to Representative Kelker's comment and request for help. But I think it's important for people to understand that there is a perception that Billings has a lot of resources. We may have resources, but our resources are so overwhelmed and tapped. These parolees may as well be sent to a rural community that has no resources. Our resources are so overburdened and so overtapped. So I think it's a perception that's out there that Billings has accessible resources. Would you comment on that, Scott? Thank you.
Well said, Penny. Well said.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We are, I mean, as far as, and some of you know this, some of our treatment providers, as good a job as they can do, they are taxed, they are overwhelmed. I'll tell you, I just found out something today that I had no idea. We had a presentation today from the state hospital about mentally ill folks, and obviously mental illness and criminal activity, you know, goes hand in hand. And we have methods and procedures in our state laws to deal with that. One of them is a determination of fitness to proceed, whether they can proceed with criminal actions, meaning they even know what's going on. And they do very dangerous things that we need to deal with. And one of the things is the wait list to get into the state hospital, because they haven't increased any space for these fitness to proceed determinations. There's only 54 beds for the entire state. It takes sometimes 9 months or longer to get them into these beds where they can actually treat them with a psychiatrist, and they sit in our jail. And we do the best we can under the community health partners to medicate them, and some of them need serious medication, and Mike's folks do the best they can, but they deteriorate in our jail because the state has never increased anything with regard to the state hospital, that side of the state hospital. And to make matters worse, the lawyers for the state sat there and talked to about 50 county attorneys and deputy county attorneys today, saying, well, the best we can give you is just let them out and do a civil community-based commitment. And I'm like, where are they going to go? I know all of the treatment providers in town can't take them. They need inpatient help. The poor Billings clinic can't do all of this. So what are we doing here? And that was their answer. So there's another thing at the state level that needs to really be looked at. We do not have enough capacity even to deal with those folks on the criminal side. And we could talk all you want about all the civil commitments that my office does where people are a danger to themselves or others, and the lack of resources at the state hospital. And again, I don't fault them, but dang. So to your point, it puts so much more pressure on us when we have to come up with creative ways to deal with these poor folks in our community, when we could hopefully have that resource from the state that could help take some pressure off our local providers.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Scott. Thank you. And Bill, just to follow up with that, Representative Kelker, you know, I'm not meaning to sound harsh at all, but my encouragement would be to put a lot of pressure on these rural communities that they need to start taking some of these violent offenders and these parolees. They start taking them, my guess is they'll start getting funding to put toward Billings to help us.
Senator Gross has her hand up, and then Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to call attention and lead us to think a little bit about housing and jobs also. Our interim committee we looked in depth and had a couple of bill drafts out to ban the box where you have to check that box that says you have a felony on your record. So I know that great diligence is taken as you've been releasing folks into the community early or not holding them. Diligence is done, and people must have an address, somewhere they're going to go. But I'm finding, again, anecdotally, but I happen to be in the service industry right now and am around folks constantly who are involved in the justice system, who are living in their cars, who are living in these, really cheap motels and having a heck of a time finding a job because, when they check that box, they just get a, thank you, we'll call you. And then they don't get a call back. So I think cost of housing and ability to get a job are also factors that we need to consider when we're talking about these issues and the rise in crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up, Scott, on the comment that you made about the state hospital and the number of folks that are there and the availability of beds for folks that don't need housing. They need serious and daily help from the mental health folks and their felony records. So if you had a crystal ball, I always feel like when we have these legislators on the phone, we need to ask them, hey, here's what we need, right? And I know we don't know some of it, but if you could, I think back to my days when I worked for Governor Roscoe, and every time the DOC people would report that they were over capacity. How many beds more do you need? If that was the response that all those county attorneys got, when you looked around the room today or virtually, did you say we could use another 200 beds? What do you need at the state hospital and the state prison to get these folks into the right place?
I can't tell you the exact number. What I can tell you is everybody is suffering. There wasn't one county attorney that said, these poor folks are suffering, and it's our jails, our local jails are suffering because these are folks that you need to get out of there and you need to get help and you need to determine whether they're fit to proceed or not. And if they're not, then we need to take different action and route them differently to get them the help they need. But if you're talking 9 months, that delays everything down the road. And so, we got to make tough decisions. Unfortunately, some of these folks are very dangerous because they just don't have control over controlling those impulses and things. And they're a public safety risk. But sitting there 9 months waiting for a spot to get a bed is crazy. It's just it's never been that way. It's the last 8-9 years. It's just gotten worse. And my prosecutors, and I've got 26 prosecutors, they're sitting there, they're shaking their heads, going, "I can't do anything in this case until we get a bed open." And the court's like, "Where are we going? Why aren't we getting moving?"
Okay, thank you. We've only got a half an hour left. I think we should move on, but I did ask Dave Armstrong to sit in and listen. I want to give him an opportunity in case we've now solved the crime problem and put him out of work. We want to give him this chance to comment. So Dave, can you solve all these problems? And you got 60 seconds.
Sorry, Mayor. No.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Next. Oh, go ahead.
So I echo everything that's been said here. I was looking at the prison numbers and the like, and typically the prisons are overbooked as well. And, so the one thing I'd say is you can't build your way out of overcrowding, because basically there's probably 5 or 10 people that we would think deserve a prison bed or a jail bed for every bed we have. And so it's a massive problem. And you've hit all the issues: mental health and the uptick in meth use and drug and alcohol problems in general. So it really takes a concerted effort. I'm interested in Representative Usher's concerns about DOC. That's an interesting one too, because 80 to 85% of offenders start in the community as opposed to starting in prisons. So in other states, they go directly to the prison. So if you took 85% of the population that is hitting the communities now and put them in prison, you'd have massive prison building undertaking too. So you've hit all the right issues. It is kind of mind-boggling to kind of answer those questions, and I wish I had the answers for you, Bill. Mayor Cole, I don't. So.
Okay, maybe by our next meeting, if you could work on that.
I will.
Okay, let's move on then to item 5 of our agenda. Billings, unfortunately, has had a number of officer-involved shootings in recent years. Investigation has indicated that those have been justified. But there's always issues about how we can use non-lethal use of force better, and how we can investigate each of those serious events in a way that gives protects our officers, but also protects our citizens and those who are killed and their families. So it's very serious, but we don't have a good way to investigate in an independent way, especially in a large community like Billings. It's a very time-consuming process that requires credibility and a lot of manpower and a lot of fast attention. So the DCI, the Division of Criminal Investigation of DOJ, does have some of those resources, but they are also stretched very thin. So we've been looking at this issue. Chris Mikulski, what else can you say? And then who do we have on deck to help us discuss this issue?
So I'm going to immediately turn it over to County Attorney. I'm so grateful Scott helped us tonight. And maybe this conversation, we just got to keep really brief and come back to it in a future discussion. As we know, we've got so many of these other issues that we need to, develop a group of people to work with Kathy and Barry to offline to make a difference. Scott, can you just hit it? What you mentioned to me earlier this week, maybe there was even a little bit of progress.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, the county attorney is responsible to help the coroner conduct an inquest anytime there's an officer-involved shooting that results in a fatality. I've conducted more officer-involved shootings than any other prosecutor in the state of Montana. I have another prosecutor in my office that specializes in this. And one of the concerns was when it comes to the Billings Police Department or the Sheriff's Office, for that matter, they investigate their own. And so Sheriff Linder, Chief St. John, and I, we study best practices just like anybody in law enforcement is supposed to do. We tried to find a way that we could do this that would satisfy people that think that that's inappropriate, that you investigate your home. And what we engaged the Division of Criminal Investigation of the Department of Justice, and they just simply don't have the resources to extend to us investigators to the level that we need these things investigated. And so what we did and what we currently have in place after experimenting with a couple different ideas is the Billings Police Department, if there's an officer-involved shooting involving one of their officers, their investigative division will come in and investigate that shooting, and they follow best practices in terms of investigative techniques such as sleep cycles for the officers involved in the shooting. They put them on administrative leave, so on and so forth. But what happens is when their investigation is complete and they're going to submit it to the coroner and to me to conduct the inquest, then I provide the investigative file to the Division of Criminal Investigation. The head of that is Brian Lockerbie. He and I have recently spoken, and that relationship is going to continue moving forward. They put an independent investigator to review that. That independent investigator then reviews the investigation, and if they determine there wasn't something sufficiently done, something that needs more work, another witness that needs to give a statement, then they will make that recommendation to me. And because I have authority under the law to order that to be done, I will have that done to complete the investigation, and then DCI signs off on it. So that's the oversight, I guess, that we have on officer-involved shootings.
Thank you very much. So that's a new process, this independent review by the DCI on every one. Is that the goal?
We started it last year in 2018. The end of 2018 is, I think, when we formally entered into the arrangement with DCI. Prior to that, we had the Sheriff's Office investigating the police department and the police department investigating the Sheriff's Office.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we help get more resources for DCI in the upcoming legislature? When I talked to Brian Lockerbie a month and a half ago, before the election, he said, I was expecting to say, sure, give us all the money you can get. But instead he said, I don't know, because I don't know who's going to be the Attorney General and what that person wants. Has anybody talked with our new Attorney General to see whether we can get that person on board and also get whatever resources DCI needs?
I'm part of the DOJ advisory committee. Austin Knutson put me on there. We start our meetings with division administrators and upper level management next week. We haven't had that specific conversation. However, Mr. Mayor, the issue is, again, what Representative Kelker raised, you'd have to do it for the entire state. You would be talking about a massive increase in DCI capacity. Unfortunately, I doubt that that's a possibility. And so maybe, but that would be a massive increase into the DCI budget. And they cover a lot of other areas as far as the state goes.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Scott or anybody else, or comments on this item number 5?
Yeah, I have a question for Scott. This is Chris. Can you hear me?
You bet.
Hey, Scott, have you had a conversation maybe with having some sort of a way to put an independent group together here locally? Like, say, one person from OPD, one person from your office, and somebody else to maybe have a random group of selected individuals in a lottery to pull from if there, in the event that there is an unfortunate circumstance of an officer shooting fatality. Have you thought about maybe doing our own locally? In that aspect?
That's an interesting suggestion. However, remember that it's random, the people that the coroner picks for the jury. I have no part in that. No one has any part in that. And then if you recall, the state law, which has actually become very cumbersome to all county attorneys, the coroner that conducts the inquest that I would assist with cannot be a coroner that's affiliated with law enforcement. So it can't be a coroner that's under the purview of a sheriff. So our coroner, who the sheriff has delegated a person, the coroner responsibilities, can't sit on the inquest. So those essentially it's jurors. And if you've watched one of mine or maybe read a Gazette article about it, the jurors themselves are encouraged by me to ask their own questions. And what you might have saw, the jury wanted to go see the scene, and so we took them to the scene to view it themselves. That was completely their choice. So we already kind of have that in a way. But if there's another idea, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see if there's a way we can work out something where, that the municipalities or the jurisdiction that has the situation occur, they have something in their local budget to pay for this position if and when it comes to fruition that we have a situation that it has to kind of trigger this process.
Just keep in mind, in terms of the investigations, these are massive investigations.
I bet.
If you recall the Billings Clinic shooting from a few years ago, where we had 6 different agencies involved, that investigation took 9 months and took us probably 3 months to prepare the inquest. So these are massive things. So that would be a massive commitment to a local group and to whoever you put on.
Okay. What kind of, I guess the last question, just kind of so I can wrap my mind around it. In the state of Montana, and I don't want to hate saying average, but what's the average police-involved shooting with fatalities statewide? Are we talking 30-ish situations, 20 situations, 50?
I don't know that. I know they happen. We use some folks from the Montana Law Enforcement Academy to come and usually educate coroners, juries on things, and I think they're pretty busy in terms of going to involved shootings. But I don't know the number.
No. Yeah, the question was is how many do we have in the state of Montana? Sorry, if maybe I misspoke. How many officer-involved shootings do we have with fatalities in the state of Montana on average?
I don't know on average. I know, and maybe RD can help on this, or Sheriff Linder, but we had quite a run for a period of 2.5 years here in Billings that we were by far and away having the most.
I mean, I can tell you, Chris, that There were years in Bozeman and Gallatin County where we had none. There were years in Flathead County and in Kalispell where we had none. And then there might be a spike of 1 or 2. It was never double digits. Now that's only 2-3 counties, across the whole state, but it was rare. And still, our issue is we really do want to stand up and have our community know we want to follow best practices. The County Attorney Twito does, the police chief does. We don't like the idea that people think our own officers are investigating fellow officers, but it's the best that we have under our limited resources in Montana is what I'm told, period.
And it's understandable. I'm just trying to get a gauge on the size or the magnitude of the situation when it comes to what kind of resources we really need to come to bear in regards to solving this issue of having and I agree to have as close as possible to have a I don't know why I'm having that code, but close as possible to transparency.
Yeah, this is an anecdotal answer to the question of how many we have. I was at a meeting of mayors nationally in 2017. Tended to be larger cities, and the topic was officer-involved shootings, and the communities were kind of going around and said, well, yeah, we had 1 this year, or we had 2 this year. Sometimes they define an officer-involved shooting as anytime someone draws a weapon, even. And we got to Billings, Montana. I said we had 6. And the room just went silent. We were so far off the scale, unfortunately. So they go up, they go down, but that's not the reputation we want if we can avoid it, obviously.
Oh, understandable. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Anything else on this item before we kind of go to other issues and then try to wrap up and move on to public comment? Not seeing anything else. Chris, back to you for the potpourri, which is item number 6. I'm sorry, go ahead. Somebody said something? Sorry, I missed you.
It's Danny trying to talk, but he's freezing up.
Okay. I would just say on that potpourri list, it's to be conscientious of. We probably shouldn't take time tonight to chat about them. I'm trying to think, I'm looking at Amy, myself, Greg. I'm trying to figure out how do we take some of this tonight and work offline, right? We can't be successful digging into the weeds. Amy, can you help there a little bit?
I guess what I would recommend is that we've had some great experts on this call and really good questions from the legislators and really good work, quite frankly, from our interim committee members, Senator Gross and Representative Usher and Kelker. If you could let Chris know when looking at this agenda, what of these topics you'd be willing to help us on. And then we can start a running small group of legislators, because I know that I've spoken with many of you about these topics, and we might, Scott Twito might have an epiphany at 2 a.m. tomorrow morning, like, hey, actually, what if we did this, right? And so I think we have the opportunity to discuss an executive branch discussion and a legislative branch discussion on almost every one of these. And so if you'd be willing to work with us on them, on one of these 5 or 2 of these 5, I mean, they do run into one another. If you could just either put it in the chat now, and Chris and Greg and I will put that in the notes, that would be really easy. You just go down to the little chat button next to participants and you hit it and you start typing. Or great. So, and I see that you're saying if you could, I obviously was not clear. My kids tell me that all the time, that I'm not clear with my instructions. But if you could put like which ones you want to be part of, because I don't believe you'll have time to be part of all of these and the potpourri that Chris had. So if you could, Senator Friedel, if you could say, you want to be involved in 2 and 3 and that kind of thing, that would be helpful for us. And then we'll create some small groups and try to have a conversation with you between now and the session starts And we'll rely again upon the sheriff and County Attorney Twito and others on the phone to help give us some other ideas. And quite frankly, we'll also know who's going to run these agencies pretty soon. I think having Scott Twidle working with Austin Knutson is great. So that would be my recommendation moving forward. If you could say which ones you want to be part of now or email Chris tomorrow. Does that make sense, Chris? And I see Representative Usher looks like he might want to say something. So I don't know, Representative Usher, if you have other ideas, that would be great too.
Please.
I'm good. I think you're clear now.
Amy, I'd just like to add that I'm not on any of the criminal justice committees. I served on them, I think, one session, maybe two. But a lot of what happens with funding in Health and Human Services directly impacts some of the community support things that are sort of amorphous. So it's really not just about public safety. It's about that wider web. And I think we're seeing some of that in Billings. The discussion about the hub, or where you put services, and how do you deal with people before they get to that point. And I'll say I'm pretty concerned about where that might be going, budget-wise, going forward. So I'd just like to put that out there as something to keep an eye on.
Thank you. That is probably a good segue to item 7, which is our next meeting. We're heading into the holidays, and you're going to have to get ready for the session. I'm sure all our legislators are very busy. Is there a desire to have another meeting between now and the session? I think the assumption was we would try for one more meeting in a couple weeks, mid-December. Either a larger meeting, or if we get enough interest on specific smaller groups, then maybe we could not even have the larger meeting. But I want to make sure that the legislators have an opportunity to say what they would like to talk about and initiate, or get input from city representatives on the line here at a future meeting. Are there other topics that we want to make sure we cover, either specifically related to criminal justice, but not necessarily? Things like if you've got plans for medical marijuana legislation, LR 130 passed. So that's going to have a significant impact on the city, depending on what kind of regulations or lack of regulations come out of the on firearm use. I need to know whether to start applying for a concealed carry permit at city council meetings. Other topics. When do you want to get together again? Is there a general desire to meet in a couple of weeks? And are there topics that you want to get on that agenda?
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to jump in. This kind of goes to what Amy was saying in regard to asking the legislators what specifics they would like to help work on. If we could do the reverse also, and kind of going with what you were saying and with what Representative Kelker had said early on, if we could also know, and maybe this is for Amy and Greg also, if we could also know at the city level what the representatives feel they need help with in regard to lobbying when it comes time for the state legislature, how the city of Billings can help support some of these bills and some of the work they're doing, how we can be working with some of our rural legislators or legislators from the other communities and talking with them and how we can best help that process. The other thing I wanted to say is this entire conversation, I just want to remind everyone, we've been pretty much focused on adults. I just want to remind everyone that all of the things we've talked about today, the invisible victims are often children. And the brutality that happens with these children that are the victims that we often don't meet and talk about and make a priority. So I just want to make sure that we remember that all of the adults we've talked about have multiple children that are probably victims along with this, and hope that we keep the kids and the safety of children a priority in our community as well, and remember that also. So thank you.
Bill, I would maybe suggest or recommend that we hold the next meetings would be split up based upon the topics, the 3 different topics or 4 different topics, if you would like, and then those who are interested, who want to participate in that particular topic, then would attend that meeting. And of course, you could attend more than one meeting. I think we had a lot of good discussion here, and as Kathy asked us, like, what do you want from us? And we didn't really give a good definition of what we want. I think if we focus in on one topic, so that committee of people can come up with what it is they want, what Sheriff Linder needs, what Scott Tweeter needs, what the city can do, as Penny said, to help support that, then we can have that in just the one meeting, because this was a lot of good information, but we didn't really solve anything. And I'd like to have these meetings where we can actually have something come out of the meetings. And if we focus on one of those areas, I think that would be best bet that way.
Can I throw something in here?
Sure, Smaller.
Okay, I've been quiet, so I'm going to use a minute up here. I think the one thing I agree to this group that nobody else can is that I served in the 90s and worked on juvenile justice and other criminal issues extensively. So I've been out of it for 20 years. I've been in it for 30, out of it for 20. And the exact same conversations were taking place 30 years ago. When I left the legislature in the beginning of 2000, the exact same conversations were taking place. When I was working on juvenile justice, I did the calculations, and the DOC had no idea that they had prisoners here. Nobody knew how many beds we had for juveniles. So I estimated it at less than 1,000, but close to 1,000, but I agreed, yeah, that's probably about right. So the question I asked was, then if each bed is filled with a kid that has committed a felony, that would be a felony if committed by an adult, then that, which would be foster care, therapeutic foster care, Pine Hills, you name it, all beds, that leaves 10,000 kids with 3 felonies or more on the streets. What do you think will happen to our adult population when they turn 18 in a day? I submit to you that none of the programs have worked. None of the modifications have worked, with the possible exception of small victories in drug courts. We have not seen a reduction in anything, only greater expenditures in programs that have not yielded significant results. It is possible, as occurred to me during this, that this might not be a solution that is possible at the state level or at any government level. Certain segments of society, we'll call them micro populations, fail at a higher rate, if you want to consider what we're talking about to be failures. We don't address that. We look upon it as a macro. To look upon it as a micro is somehow considered to be untoward. It's not untoward. There are societies in the world with far less crime than ours. There are societies in the world with more crime than ours, but almost all of it stems back to, without a doubt, poverty. The elimination of poverty comes in 3 steps. You graduate from high school, you don't have a kid until you're married, and you don't get married until you're 22, and 90% of the people that fall within that do not have criminal justice problems. If we cannot get society to accept that, and microcosms of our society to accept that, no matter what we do, is going to fail at the same rate that it has always failed. And I'll get off my soapbox.
All right, important reminders. Thank you. We want to leave time for public comment. Other items on so stay tuned. Bottom line on a future meeting, stay tuned. We'll put Chris Kukulski on figuring that out. either series of smaller meetings or larger, whatever. Well, but watch your email. Let's open up for public comment, see if anybody's still with us from the public. I can't necessarily see you, but if you're with us, and anybody, doesn't have to be, you're all a member of the public now. Would anybody like to give us our 2 cents? Just shout out who you are, tell us who you are, and why don't you take about 3 minutes at the most. Anybody out there who's on the site, out in cyberspace? I think I know most of the names, not recognizing anybody. I'm not hearing any public comment. We're going to close our public comment period if somebody doesn't speak up. Okay, public comment period is closed. And so I think we'll adjourn unless anybody else on the call wants to add anything else, and we'll be 3 minutes early. Don't say I never gave you.
Mayor, we'll keep inside your 3. We will circle back. Thank you. For those who are frustrated because we didn't solve problems tonight, recognize this. We didn't used to do these. We'd meet each other up in Helena for the first time at a hearing. So this is a starting point. We're building relationships and we will work together. So you will hear back from me in these smaller group ways. So thank you.
Well, and I want to thank, Chris and the mayor, because that's really true. This, I've been around in this for 10 years and this hasn't happened. And I think it's really helpful to have as many people as possible in on the conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, good, well point. Councilor Ronnie?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know how many legislators have actually toured the Yellowstone County Detention Facility, but maybe if that's an option that they could actually have eyes on and see the facility, maybe also see the brand new evidence facility that we have in Billings and what we had prior, and to see just what we're dealing with here. That may, if that's an opportunity, Sheriff Linder, I don't mean to put any pressure on you, but if that's an opportunity, sometimes having eyes on something makes a big difference. So just wanted to suggest that.
Absolutely. We're always willing to take you out on a little tour there. Just right now with the COVID, we're trying to be a little bit cautious, but maybe when we get a little better handle on things, we'd be more than willing to take you.
Please don't violate the health officer's order. I get enough of those already.
And let me thank County Attorney Twido and the sheriff. We really do work together locally. We have to. We do it every day. Our officers and our people out on the street do. So thanks for joining us tonight. And I know we'll need more of these. So thank you.
I have a lot of respect for everyone at the city. I know they do their best, and all of you that I've worked with. I just offer this. Even if I don't agree with you legislatively, if it comes to a criminal justice issue that you have strong feelings for, I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to navigate things. I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm going into my how many sessions I've been involved in on the criminal justice stuff. If I don't know the answer to it, I know the person who does know the answer. I can find it for you. So please feel free to call me, call one of my prosecutors. We're happy to talk to you about criminal justice issues that really impact our city.
Great. Thank you, everybody. This is progress. Again, thank you for your service. We'll see you soon and have a great December and stay safe. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.